Becca, welcome. Everyone else tuning in, welcome to another meeting, our fifth meeting of Source Simplified. So thank you, all of you that are tuning in live, and thank you all tuning in on the recording on YouTube. Again, for whatever reason, your attention could be anywhere, doing anything. And yet here we are together, sharing our attention, sharing our awareness. So feel free to take a few deeper breaths, really feeling the breath enter and exit. Just to, so to speak, arrive where we are. Relaxing into our being. And ever so simply, ever so gently, we are noticing whatever is arising, whatever thoughts, sensations, emotions arise. We observe, we watch, we are the space in which all of these objects seem to arise. Resting as our shared being. We cannot take a step toward ourself because we are ourself, nor can we take a step away from ourself because we always are ourself. In the midst of experience, in the midst of thoughts, sensations, emotions, this is the common thread. That does not end, nor does it begin. It simply is. And this that we are, that simply is not extraordinary or out of the ordinary, rather. It's the most simple and obvious. And it is for this reason that it is overlooked. because it is so obvious, because it permeates everything and everyone. And yet exclusively it cannot be found in any one thing or said in any one singular word. And yet it is the material out of which all words, thoughts, sensations, emotions are made. Another way to put it is we are the mystery. We are the living, breathing mystery of the universe itself, looking through our eyes. And that mystery is everything our eyes look upon, the space between, and that which our eyes are made of. As Nisargadatta Maharaj said, you are that. Whatever that is, whatever we are, that is what we are. And since it is what we are, we can never become, we can only seem to become what we are, because what we are is our being. And so there's this ever birthing, dying, in breath, out breath of being and becoming, being and becoming. And it's a mystery. Whatever this is an absolute mystery to me. And if it is the case that we are made in the image and likeness of that which created us, well, the question I come back to in contemplating, in sharing in these ways is, well, now what? So what? Now what? And one of the only things that seems to make much sense is to create like the creator, to live life as a work of art, to create art. And to say that in another way, it is to do in our hearts what each of us intuitively, naturally feels most called to do for no other reason other than we love it. We wish to do it. It's a very silly question if we ask a child, why are you playing? Why are you playing make-believe, child? And it doesn't make any sense. So the invitation is to follow our heart's path. Wherever that may lead. To follow the yes without needing to know why we feel that deep yearning and calling. To not let the music die inside of ourselves, to sing our song. To do what only we can do to bring that forth and to share that in the world. And I submit the more of us that bring this forth, the more peaceful, joyful world we will live in, the more each of us is acting on behalf of the understanding of our interconnected shared nature, the more that nature will shine forth in every relationship between countries, between leaders. And so this is, in a small way, my song. My portrait. I guess I should really say our song, our portrait. That's how it appears to me. And so this brings to an end the contemplative meditative portion of Source Simplified. And I invite you live, if you're here live or if you are on the recording, to just take a note. I always find it so interesting when coming in and coming out of change in a state of consciousness. And in a way, we're in this shared meditative field, if we can call it a field together. And then we're going to go into probably a bit of dialogue. We can also sit in silence. That's entirely welcome and fine by me too. But it's really interesting to pay attention to the quality of peace, if there is peace being felt now, because it is often that we lose that peace, or we seemingly lose that peace upon re-entering into the world of experience. And so that peace becomes eclipsed or covered up, in some cases, sometimes depending where we're at on our journey, by a particular experience. So when we're transitioning and reopening our eyes and maybe taking some smaller movements and looking around or beginning to speak, it's interesting to notice the quality of your heart and to play with staying in your heart space amidst a job, a relationship, a conversation. It's very subtle. In the movie, I don't know if any of you, or if you, Becca, have seen this movie, I Heart Huckabees. It's a really quite a funny movie about existential they're existential life consultants, and they follow regular average people around, and they kind of spy on them to help them find the meaning of their life. And they're like their lawyer, but they're their lawyer for finding meaning and purpose in life. Very well done film. It has Mark Wahlberg in it, and Dustin Hoffman is in it too. I think Barbara Streisand plays opposite Dustin Hoffman, and they're the two existential detectives. And at one point, they have this guy in the room, and he says, I believe it's in the trailer too. He says, "How am I not myself?" And Dustin Hoffman repeats back to him. He said, "Yes. How are you not yourself?" And the guy has this kind of epiphany. He's like, "How am I not myself?" Realizing, it seems, or approaching the realization that he is always indeed himself. Yeah. So thank you all for being here on the recording. Thank you, Becca, for being here live. And the floor is now open for more than just me to be speaking. I've got to ask to unmute you. There you go.
Just as you were, that whole bit about talking as you're coming out of the meditative state.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning, before you started speaking, I was going to ask you, knowing this beingness that all arises in, and you actually just said about it getting obscured or less obvious when you engage in talking to people, life, going out and doing your life stuff. And you just said, that as you come out of this meditative state, of course, you maybe have your focuses in your mind rather than your heart, and staying in your heart. And this, the instant that you can just drop back into the heart and feel the beingness that everything is arising of beingness, or whatever word is that,
Mm-hmm.
this that we spoke about. Can you get there? Can you stay in that knowing as you're speaking, as you're getting conversations with different people? Do you get, can you do that?
Well, so I want to answer that in two ways. The first one is that place, the place of being, as proposed by, we could talk about all of the non-dual philosophies, from A Course in Miracles to Veda Vedanta to Buddhism. What is being said is that that's the only real thing that there is anyway. So there's no time when you or me or anyone isn't expressing from that being. However, it can feel right, and we can have these thoughts and sensations where it feels like we're going out and we're no longer speaking or being from that place amidst conversation. So I think that's a gradual process. I think that's a gradual process of more and more feeling as though one is remaining in their heart space amidst conversation. So I think it can certainly appear and feel like a gradual process too.
It's very easy, not very easy. It's easier when you are actually speaking about this, because to speak about this, you have to be from there. So it does make it easier. Um, I I got such a wonderful vision, not a vision, a feeling, the whole thing of absolutely getting that everything arises out of this. I absolutely, it just keeps coming now that, our conversation, sitting on the bed, my partner in the room, are arising out of this, which is me, not this little small me, my narrow me. I got such a sensation that it was really strange to be in such a tiny container when the I am is everything, like big, massive, huge, universal. And I was sitting in a tiny space with, it stopped here. It was so strange. So this has carried on with this feeling. And then I see what happens when I engage in conversations and, the toing and froing of life. And then I get a little second on my own and I feel this, everything expressing itself within this that I am, and it's been such a great week because that happened and I cannot unknow it. I can't not see it. It's just happening.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's like you don't even have to be in the heart as such. It's like all meaning, these words just lose meaning. So much lost meaning. Anyway.
Yeah, I tried to say it in so many words in the meditation. I had a conversation with my dear friend yesterday, and I said something like, "We're all it, but we can't find it in any one thing. And so any one thing we try to say about it is not going to be it. And yet at the same time, it is what makes up everything that actually is. Yet it cannot be pointed to because it's not an object. So good luck."
Well, I
That's
think in your just as I was sitting there letting your words come in, they do seem to have, there was nothing, it was absolutely feeling authentic to the experience that is happening here. And I keep wanting to say my experience, and then it just feels so ridiculous to say my experience because who is my? This is this little person thinking that they're having an experience. And
yeah.
that
Yeah.
also seems like a bit of a joke. I quite a long time ago, I had some amazing sessions with my um, sister-in-law, she wanted to introduce me to my higher self and my was it child self? I can't remember now. So deep meditation stuff,
Mm.
and this uh, sense of I didn't really have a character, but there was a sense of life, of something, a being, entity. It doesn't matter really, but it was like what was so funny about it was that this so-called higher self, it doesn't seem to have the right word at all for this, had this unconditional love, absolute, total acceptance, total love of this, but also this kind of uh, slight humor and uh, slightly piss taking, not in a bad way, just a real sweet kind of, yeah, you don't need to take all this so seriously. And this week, I have absolutely got it. It was like, oh, finally, this, whatever this was that I was introduced to, must be just going, hooray, you've got
Hmm.
it. It's not serious.
Hmm.
It was never serious. Because to see everything as arriving, as appearing in this, how could we, how can we take it all so seriously? The small me wants to be very serious, and it's, I think it's a bit of a, it's so funny. I can't help it. It's just so funny.
Yeah. I mean, when, when I've shared this before on the channel, so some other people have heard both of these things that I'm going to share with you, but when I had one of my what I could say, well, looking back on it, one of my first awakening moments, realization moments, I was right before it, I was freaking out. Like literally, I thought I lost my mind. I thought that I didn't exist, and it was terrifying. It was very terrifying at that moment from a particular perspective to feel like, oh my God, I have lost my mind. I've gone crazy. And then I finally managed to get myself together enough, and I asked myself this question. I was alone. No one else was with me. There was, just to be clear, because it definitely had an effect on what was happening. It was my first large dose, and I'm not, to be very clear, I'm not suggesting that anybody do this. I'm also not suggesting that anybody not do this. I'm simply sharing my story. I had a large dose of psilocybin mushrooms, magic mushrooms, because a lot of these different consciousness explorers had talked about how one could reach ego dissolution or ego death if one takes enough of these. So I want to find out. And I had meditated for, like, I put my time in. I said, I've meditated enough. It's time for me to see if what these people are talking about is true. Anyway, uh, I had literally self-diagnosed myself with schizophrenia because I was studying psychology at the time too. I'm like, this is it. I lost my mind. Tomorrow I'm going to go be checked into mental institution, and I've screwed this thing up completely, and I don't even exist. And it was terrifying. It was terrible. I had no context, Becca. I was looking at my own hands through my own eyes, but they were no longer my hands and they were no longer my eyes. No reference for, and the people that I had talked to had warned me about that at some point it can be very destabilizing, let's say, to not have a reference point for how you exist. But here's the beautiful thing. I didn't intentionally do this. I didn't intentionally say, I'm going to practice self-inquiry, which I'm sure you're familiar with self-inquiry, which is like, who am I? What am I? This sort of contemplative practice. I knew about that, but I didn't say, I'm going to get myself out of this. I just said to myself, I said, wait a minute. If I don't exist, then who or what is so worried about it? And in that moment of me asking that question, I cried and laughed for hours because I got the what I feel like is this cosmic joke, and up into and including the fact that I can't talk about it. I realize it's absolutely hopeless for me to ever actually say anything because it's only the same thing kind of speaking to itself and making noises to it. So it doesn't really matter what these noises are. I mean, it just felt hopeless. I wrote a contemplation about it later called Hopelessly Free. And that's exactly the, I mean, that was, and then this happened after that without mushrooms as well, with meditating. But that's the thing. It's like even saying it happened is not quite right, because what was very clear was nothing really happened, and there was a clear seeing that it was always this way, and it didn't even have anything to do with mushrooms either. It had everything to do with my own mind. Kind of, it seems to me like it's the placebo effect of how strong the mind is. It's like my mind says, I'm going to hide the answer there, and then I'm going to go through this whole big thing only to discover, ta-da, I did it all. And by the way, nothing happened, and it's not different than it ever was or ever will be. It's like, what do you do with that? Except, I mean, it's the most incredible that. uh, and then the last thing I wanted to share with you, it's right in alignment with this. I may have shared it in our last meeting. I like to use the analogy of fish. It's like you're a fish in water and I'm a fish in water, and then I'm coming up to you and I'm going, do you know anything about where I could find some water? I'm looking for water. And
Just
then
like,
what is the other fish get? It's like you can meditate for a while, and then one day you're gonna realize that you're already wet and it's all around you. It's like, what do
yeah.
you
It is as simple as that. It's as simple as that. And it's not, nothing changes. This is what's so incredible. Nothing changes, and yet everything changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just yeah, I had a lovely, lovely time on well, how do you say that thing, the mushrooms again? Oh, it's so nice.
Psilocybin mushrooms.
And in a somebody who'd already we said, come here, come here, let's do this. Have a
Hmm.
cup of tea, full of them, and go and be in this lovely park in the outside Bristol. And
Hmm.
the world just turned into, I disappeared, but I was so happy without it. It was, you never said that bit. I thought you told me all this stuff, but you never said that you disappear. Lovely. It was lovely.
Hmm.
Everything. Just like the total absorption into merging into everything. And yeah, I got the whole thing. That's the lovely bit about it, was that I disappeared. But it wasn't frightening. In my experience, it wasn't frightening. It just went into sort of like, okay, because I
Hmm.
think what I do think is that when I was very small, I had this. I went into a bliss state a lot, and I call it Becca world now, because I had this bubble around me, and once I was away from people, I could be in a state of bliss, and it didn't matter where I was, in my bedroom, out in the. I was spent a lot of time outside in the
Hmm.
lanes, the fields,
Likewise, yeah, when I was a child.
and it turned into bliss world. And it just was
Mhm.
the micro detail of the moss on the stones and the leaves and the birds and the whatever I was doing inside or whatever I was doing outside. And so this, what this meditative stuff as an adult has taken me to know, I know this. I know the state of nothingness, of me not being here, but this beautiful aliveness, which means I'm totally here, more here than pretending to be somebody because the society tells me I've got to look like this and do this and do that. So yeah, that mushroom time was a beautiful restoration of my childhood bliss bubble.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
but that lovely thing of going, who's worried?
Who's worried? Who is it? Gotcha, ego. You're not even the ego, so to speak. I'm just gonna call it that. It was worried that it didn't even exist, which is it's a subtle way that it's gonna hold on, which is it
Yeah,
is from one perspective terrifying,
but isn't
terrifying. And then if you just look at it from a little other perspective, it's like, oh, what a joke! Like literally, what a hysterical joke.
it is a joke.
I think that one of the most fitting quotes, and this is the interesting thing about this stuff because other people will listen in on this. There, so I want to say something about that is that I really do feel that following the heart's calling and the intuitive impulse to seek, if that's enjoyable. Like I know I went on a spiritual seeking journey because I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. I'm like, what is this? What is this all about? I'm fascinated by this. I was pulled towards it rather. And I think that doing that, there's a correlation between one's intention and one's attention, and then what actually happens. And what, I don't know if I would have had any of these experiences if I didn't do all of these different things. And that's where it's the paradox, because then at the same time, I now looking back at all these things that I've done to arrive here can see that none of those things were necessary to get to where I already was to begin with. So it's like really, it's hopeless, but it's also full of hope in the sense that the only thing that I'm suggesting is that people follow their heart and see like what's at the end of that. And so that the quote that I want to share is it's a Zen quote, and that's the thing. People will have an enlightening experience or a recognition. I like to use the word recognition, and they'll say, well, oh, I didn't realize it was so simple. Why didn't anybody say it like that before? And then they might look at all the books that they read and see that it was being said exactly like that. It's just that if the fruit isn't ripe, it's not going to fall off the tree. It falls off when it falls off. And then one can see looking back, I'm like, oh, this really was the message that was being shared all along. And one that I heard that I love so much is before enlightenment, mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers. During enlightenment or at the moment of enlightenment, mountains are no longer mountains and rivers are no longer rivers. After enlightenment, mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers.
There's one about sweeping floors and chopping wood. I think the same.
Yeah.
Before you sweep floors and you chop wood. Afterwards, you sweep floors and you chop wood. And yeah, nothing changed, but everything changes. Um, so what was interesting was seeing what was arising, because one of the talks you did was about knowing about conflict in parts of the world. And there was a seeing of the seemingly two sides to a story appearing in this. So there was a seemingly, it looks like conflict, but is it just this appearing as a conflict? Is it just, it was so strange to feel that there was something inside that could stay so still and quiet, because I that knowing of suffering of some other, it doesn't seem like part of the joke, you know, that the suffering of
Right.
others.
Certainly. Yeah.
I can feel like it is one huge joke in 1 second. And then in comes this thought, is the suffering of others one huge joke? But what I could what is seeing, right? Well, I'll just use seeing for now. So I saw that, or I see that I am the, I can see that the victim and the perpetrator, if you just took it down to singular, to just one event, is arising in this. There isn't a judgment about this, saying that this, what is arising in this, has bad or good. So this occurrence of life unfolding, be it looking like suffering or war, maybe, is unfolding according to, you know, it's not actually on my doorstep. So it's, so far it's a story seemingly appearing as in this that I am. So it's within me. And I felt like I could feel, when there was no judgment, seeing that suffering, that it didn't give it any, would it be? It was totally allowing both to happen, peace and conflict to happen, completely allowing it to be the expression of what it is somehow. Does that, it was such a surprise to the small me because this hasn't got a surprise. It just, it's going, yeah, this is what it looks like. And at the same time, I could feel this kind of like bubble of laughing coming up over everything, because it was such a crazy thing to know, to that all along. And I wonder that what you were saying about, I mean, this is why you want to open it to people. This is why you want to spread it, is because of this knowing, when you do realize it, as soon as you realize it, why would you remotely hurt anybody? It's you. Yeah, it's coming out of you. The person
Exactly.
rising out of this, which is me. And that, I think you said something about a question that you asked your friend, and their question, like the big question in the world, how do we live peacefully together, could be the question. Or the question is, what is this? And that is it, because when you know it, everything else is all of that. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm finding it really difficult to say what
Yeah. It's,
I
yeah.
see. I'm
Hmm.
not practiced at voicing it any yet, because it feels like I've read it, and read it and read it and absorbed it, but I haven't had it shown to me so clearly.
Hmm.
It's, as an absolute this. So it is remarkable, and it's ordinary.
Hmm. Remarkably ordinary. Yeah. It's, there, if my future is going to be anything like my past has been, knock on wood, as I'm sitting here at this desk, I'm that my true being, my true self is free of suffering. But I would be lying if I sat here and I said to you, in the past 2 weeks, did some kind of something come up where I bought into it? Of course, yeah, that it does happen. Maybe not as frequently, or not, or maybe there's a little bit more of a space or a gap, or maybe the low will be really, really low, but it'll be for a shorter frequency, and then I'm kind of back out of it, identified with who and what I am. And then on the note of conflict, I actually talked to my friend Dom this morning, the gentleman that I had that conversation with, that I was sharing with you about. and this is great that you're bringing this up, because this is now my third opportunity to talk about this. I had another conversation with a friend last night about this very same thing, and it's such a subtle, it's such a like a subtle point. But the first point that I want to share on it is, again, this point of, I believe it's up to everyone to do whatever they feel called to do naturally. And there's something about that, just that very thing, that if everybody is doing what they feel called to do naturally, and I mean something very particular. I mean, I'm not trying to create an army of people that are out to show the whole world, this is your true nature, this is who you are. That's just what I'm feel called to do, because that's my like artwork. We talked about artwork before. For whatever reason, that's my thing. Like, that's how I feel I can contribute to the world, and it's also the most meaningful thing to me. So that's it. For other people, it's going to look like other responses and things in the world. And so, on that note, I talked with David and Dom about this. What's important for me, or what I think is important, is that when someone's responding to someone who's, we were using the example of starving. We're using the example of somebody that's starving. And I realized in that example, there was an assumption, actually, that the person that's starving is suffering. I'm being very rigorously technical here, but
Yeah, yeah,
we were assuming, we were just assuming that the
yeah,
person that's starving is suffering. And I don't know if that's, I don't know where that truth is being derived from. And so I started to question and say that I really think what's important is, let's say, for example, if I have some food and I am sharing it with someone that's starving, it has nothing to do with some intellectual understanding of me sharing with them what their true nature is, or saying, you know what the nature, you're not really starving. The nature of yourself is like, of course not. That just is just absolute nonsense to me, which I get that question from time to time. And that has to do with reductionism and people thinking that there's one way to do it. Just doesn't work that way. And so rather, for me, it's living from my understanding of oneness and not buying into or believing into otherness, into, because what if I'm creating that? What if in that moment, that's what I'm creating when I go, here's another being that I need to help, and they're suffering, and I'm here to, what if I'm literally kind of
yeah,
creating that as a, versus if I'm just intuitively acting and, yeah, sharing a meal or this, but who do I think I'm sharing it with? I think that's the really important thing. Who do I really feel in my heart? Am I going to sell out in a way and buy into this like thing where all of a sudden I'm the, which can have a subtle amount of like self-righteousness or savior complex in it? Or am I just going to help and just be of service without necessarily putting some kind of intellectual label or something on it? And I feel like that's what the outpouring of this understanding is important in a lived way. It has very little, if anything, to do with talking about it, and more to just the quality of which, how I'm meeting somebody, whoever, whether they're helping me or I'm helping them. It's not even, it's just, how am I meeting who I'm meeting? Am I seeing, am I looking in their eyes and knowing inside, or is there something else happening? So anyway, I know that was a bit of a tangent, but this very
yeah.
conversation
It has
present.
this. It has that. When you see that everything is arising in this, am I allowing or allowing the suffering to be seen? Yeah, I agree about nobody. We will never know. We could make huge assumptions about suffering, and so come back from the assumptions. Come back
Mhm.
from the assumptions, and it just seemed to me as though there was almost a lessening of the attachment to the story about a conflict.
Yes.
So something happened where I saw that as being something that arose up. I can give it attention at the time, and then there was some sort of detachment from that.
Mm-hmm.
Something
Mm-hmm.
happened like that. So I totally get you can't put yourself inside somebody else and feel what the world feels like from their viewpoint or their feeling. They could be in a blissfully happy state. We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know
Mm-hmm.
what's going on. We don't know what it looks like. Uh, ah, you're so good at explaining what's going on, and I can't explain what's going on, but it's
I
been
don't know. I'm giving my best attempt. I don't know how accurate it is, but I do this a
well,
lot,
it
you know.
makes
So,
a huge amount of sense. And it's incredible how many layers of our psyche and understanding is going on in just one. Like you just, what would I do if I met somebody who was starving? And just look at all the layers that you just brought up in that one little
right.
scenario. You know that um, the authentic action from a heart place, if we're just looking at to simplify everything down to I know what it was talking about was I read this amazing little quote about choiceless living, choices and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and I got a feeling about the surrender, the total surrender of being guided. So if one said, I am going to act from my heart, like you know, let's see where our heart takes us. Like you say, it could take you to do these lovely podcast things or these things, or it could take you to um, paint or grow things for people or whatever it is. And I felt this feeling of completely allowing the guidance to be from this love place.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
what I don't even know if action would happen. Would action? It might action might happen from there. So something moves my body around. Is it my thought? I'm not convinced about that. I think my thought likes to try and catch up and pretend it's in control. But I think actually you could almost just let go of that. Let everything be guided by. My son had a. Sorry, I keep going off on something, but I come back to it. He died, had one of those death experiences, and came back, and um, so he talks about what this is, and he calls it the way. Is his words. So I can imagine being guided, or I can feel it anyway, because if you completely
Mm-hmm.
let go, you can be guided by the way or the will of God or whatever is the
Mm-hmm.
version in yourself with this total surrender. And what's incredible is that you're not let the mind stop being in control. Your life doesn't go out of control. It just gets, to me, it just gets easier and more peaceful. It seems as though our natural, unconditioned and uninterfered with the mind is
Yeah.
a natural thing would happen. It can happen. So somebody in front of you who is hungry, there's a simple thing in the action of either getting food or bringing food or saying, come home with me and I'll feed, come, I'll make something, let's eat. You eat, you're hungry, it's so simple. It, because it's just the action of something that's right in front of you. Is it something like that? Well, I don't know where I've gone with that.
Yeah. The thing that was coming to mind before, which is animals and how it's a silly example because animals aren't maybe as prone to share as human beings are food. But imagine like the way I think of it is a squirrel who's got a bunch of nuts and they're snacking on the nuts. And then this other squirrel comes up and let's say that this one squirrel has an amount of nuts that it can't possibly eat. So it has a surplus. It's got plenty of nuts, billions of nuts. which is an interesting billions of dollars. Just so the one squirrel has billions of nuts, and this other squirrel comes up to him, and he's gaunt, and he's like crawling up to him, and he looks at the squirrel. That squirrel can't even see. Let's say he sees him over his pile of nuts, and he sees the other squirrel start eating the nuts. Is the one squirrel thinking, I am helping the starving squirrel? No, of course not. That's just what's happening. And that's what I was thinking of
That's it.
last piece. It's like
It's
that's
just
what's
what's
happening.
happening.
And I think that it is similar to the reality of what's happening with humans in certain situations. So that's just what's happening.
And we add on the rest. And
Right. Yeah. So it's a
that's
narrative.
when you see that if you just went with what's happening and took all the other add-ons, the thoughts, the emotions, the ideas, the assumptions, the judgments. Is that just what our ego is for? Just to make stories out of nothing and invent drama?
I think it has something. I've thought about this so much. I think it has something to do with protecting the organism, the biological or
Yeah. Oops.
sorry about that.
That's all right.
I think my laptop, I didn't realize it was unplugged. So anyway, the last thing I was saying was I think it has something to do with protecting the organism and uh, fight or flight or freeze responses,
Oh
right?
yes.
So
It does
like
have a
I
use,
think
yes. There is that.
I think that's where a lot of the whole, which can be like it's a very gripping and compelling narrative. So I've done a good degree of, I'm still on my way with it, trauma work and healing trauma work, and I do that sometimes with other people when it comes to things that they're challenged with. So this is what I could say to the ego. I my experience, it has been revealed to me that when it comes to healing a trauma, which I think could be another way for healing an ego that has been that has seen something or experienced something that then programmed it in its mind to say, when this happens, I need to do this because this is what keeps me alive. But when
Mm.
I re-enter into those experiences in reenactment or in actual real life situations, I notice that there's a small, sometimes it's a very small degree of space. But in that small degree of space, which I believe is the result, is the story my mind tells me, which I believe is a result of practices and contemplation and meditation and wanting to experience my shared nature with all. There'll be a little space where I can kind of choose and I can say, wait a minute, you don't need to freeze right now. You don't need to run away and you don't need to fight. There can actually be something else here. Whoa, I didn't even know that was available to me. But yeah, I think that's the way. Like, I think the ego wants to find the easiest way, the quickest way, the most efficient way to keep the mind and body safe. I think that's
Yeah.
what it's,
Okay. I can feel that.
you know.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. There's the yes, absolutely. I made the practice for myself for many years to if I got uh, triggered by something, just something in front of me, um, people or words, events, whatever, to feel who got hurt by that, who and like I felt it like could follow down inside in like a spiral and follow down and down to my small self who was like you say, reenacting a something, an event from my past or something. And I just felt like, oh, hello, here we are. This is my poor me story. It says,
Mhm.
hurt poor me. And I soothed that. Whenever I just soothed the poor me who who got triggered. And it seems that in the years of soothing, the poor me is not really, there's so little that has this triggering now because it's topped up with the love that it needed to help with the trauma in the first place. So um yeah, it's so fascinating, this understanding the subtleties of this mind with its purpose, like you just said about safety, and those thinking and the additional add-on type of thought processes which are actually detrimental to our, it has this lovely survival purpose, but then it also has a kind of self-sabotage purpose in amongst it. So understanding the difference between the two, and you know like that gap you said about what can my response be to this. There is
Right.
a who is getting triggered, who can respond, what is happening.
Mhm.
It's interesting, the whole learning about what happens to this self who has been traumatized by something.
Yeah. Very interesting. Very. And that's where I think that there's an intersection with capital S self and small self, because, or ego, or traumatized self, because all I believe and I experience with the healing work that I've done. There's a book called No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz, IFS, Internal Family Systems. And it's all about the big capital S self actually healing the traumatized parts of ourselves by parenting and giving love and attention and care to these parts that got exiled or felt like they needed to protect us, or et cetera, et cetera. Um, and I think that's where they intersect. It's where the capital S self can give love, kindness, and attention. This is a great example for everything we're talking about. Never would the capital S self inside me say to a traumatized part, "You're not actually suffering. You know that it's all an illusion. This is all like, no, of course not. I'm gonna treat that part of me like a small child and say, hey, I'm here for you. I hear you. Let's get through this together in solidarity and love." I think that's the solution to the external world problems a lot of the time too. And when more and more people are focusing on that, I do believe that will have a ripple effect on all beings. At least that's the story I like to tell myself.
The small self.
Uh,
I just have to tell you about this the joke bit carried on, and I was driving in the village just over the bridge here, and pulled in by the side of the road where there was a little parking space, which is really good, and to get the lorry because the roads are very narrow, very narrow.
mhm.
And as I pulled in, the back end of my car fell off and made this horrendous noise. And once I'd realised that I hadn't hit anything, it had just fallen off and scraped and made this horrendous noise. And we just, God, I got such a rush of giggles. It was just so hilarious to see my car in pieces. And it just felt like, thanks, universe. Thanks, that's great. Yeah, what am I going to do with this then? And it was just so funny. Tied it on with a bit of string and drove home, because it's got help from a wonderful person who turned up.
It's great. It's
And
great in those moments when immediately there's not even the old response of whatever. It's just immediate
not at
humor.
all, just total hilarity. Just
Yeah, that's good. I love that. Mm.
It was sort of on the back of this universal joke that we take everything so seriously and that we believe our thoughts and we believe we invest so much in this small self, you know, and it didn't really, things had stopped mattering in that moment. And yeah, the fact that the back of the car fell off did not matter at all. It was just very amusing.
There's this quote, because you've said sweating the small stuff a couple of times. I tried to look it up to see who it's attributed to, and I can't find who said this quote. I mean, we all know the quote, "Don't sweat the small stuff," but there's an add-on to it that says, "Don't sweat the small stuff," and it's all small stuff, including death and dying.
Yeah, that's it.
Isn't that a good one? Yeah.
That's included in the small stuff.
That's the small stuff too.
That's it. Oh, superb.
Well, as always, I've had a wonderful time with you. I actually have an appointment here at 1:30 in about 15 minutes that I've got to get going to. But I did want to make a handful of announcements, very exciting announcements. First and foremost, everyone knows that this meeting, I'm doing these every Saturday, 12 p.m. Eastern time, unless otherwise announced. It's the same Zoom link. If you feel like contributing to this, there's a PayPal link, and you're welcome to make a contribution. Also, this is new. I'm launching in the new year, starting on January 6th, that's Saturday, a program, a group, a community rather, called Heart of the Matter. And this is going to be for one full year and then beyond into 2025. And we're doing 3 meetings for the first 3 Saturdays of every month. There's ways for people to join on scholarship, ways to join for free. You can also contribute yearly or monthly. So I'm going to put the link and all the information for Heart of the Matter. This is actually the first time I'm publicly sharing about it. I've just been sharing in messages. So I'm excited to share this in this way, as I haven't done something in a more of like a long-term container in this way. So that will be in the description. And thank you for joining today, Becca. Thank you everyone else who joins on the replay. Let us know in the comments if there's something that resonated with you. If you have a question for me, or maybe you have a question for Becca here, feel free to put it in the comments. I love to get back to the comments and engage in that way. And I encourage you, if you are one of those that have been watching, I see the view count on my end. I encourage you to come on live here for a meeting if you feel inclined, and we'll have a good time together. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Becca.
Can I just ask about the PayPal? Because I went and looked on, where did I go? I followed the link to PayPal to, oh, I can't remember. I haven't got a PayPal account. It's just pure personal reasons. I just,
Yeah, I understand
Is
people
there
outside of
some
the
other
United States.
way? Because I would like to give you a donation because I feel like, this is giving me such, I don't know what happens actually. It's really lovely what's happening. Anyway,
Neither do I. I don't know what's happening either. But you want to pay me? I like that. Yeah, we can figure out. I can.
Do something so that I can
Yes. There's other. Oh, you know what? The same thing that I have set up. I also have a Stripe account, that's a universal payment thing. You just like put your credit card. I can send you my Stripe link, and then maybe that's good information because I know there's other people globally that tune in, and not everyone has PayPal. So yeah, good idea.
Could I send you my email to send that back to on somewhere?
Yeah. You can send me your email. Gosh, do I have your personal?
I didn't
Let's.
really.
Oh yeah, I guess we're only connected here. You know what I can do? I know. You can send me in Zoom just so it's not publicly accessed in the chat. You can privately send me your your email.
So where do I find in Zoom? I can find it, can I?
So do you see? Oh, here, I'll close the meeting.
Yeah.
Everybody, thank you. I'll see you next time on Source Simplified. I'm just gonna end the recording and we'll take care of this because we don't need to share the rest of this. Let's see here.